Thank you so much. We are here with Yariv Mozer, the producer of the Devil's Confessions, the Lost Eichmanns recordings. And before anything, I need to tell you, Yariv, thank you. Thank you on behalf of the Jewish people, on behalf of history, and unfortunately also on behalf on those who perished in this process and were not able to have a full account of the story. So first of all, thank you.
Well, it's bigger than me, so it's not only me, and it's a whole group of people that worked with me, and to achieve this great production film that will serve as a vehicle to present to the world. This is what happened. We should stick to this memory, and we should never forget, and also fight anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, which still exists, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's something almost humorous about the fact that Sasson, who we're going to talk about more, starts off his recordings of Eichmann trying to deny the Holocaust, and then finds out that it was so much worse than he thought, which is typical of what you see often with anti-Semites. They either deny the Holocaust or then move to take pride in it. But before anything, let me ask you, how did you get to this? How does one even, I mean, it's a wild project. You retrieved recordings that are more than 70 years old and reveal some of the greatest revelations in terms of Holocaust studies. How did you get to all of this?
I think I have in me, the fact that I'm a third generation of Holocaust survivors. I was always interested in knowing more about what happened, mainly in recent years. When I was a child, when my grandparents were still alive, I wasn't smart enough to talk with them on what happened to them. This is something that I really feel sorry of, and during the last 10 years as a filmmaker, I'm devoting a lot of my time to look into the history of the Jewish people of Israel. One of my biggest projects was a film I did about David Ben-Gurion, in which I discovered an unknown interview of David Ben-Gurion, 6 hours of a filmed interview that no one knew that exists. And it became the core of this documentary film called Ben-Gurion Epilogue, which I won with it the Israeli Academy Award, and the film traveled very well. And since then, I've received a lot of people telling me stories, and one of them was the producer of this project, who came to me and told me about. His name is Kobe. He came and told me, "Look, there is a rumor or a story about an interview Eichmann gave in 1957 in a place of hiding in Argentina to a Nazi journalist, just telling him sincerely what happened in the Holocaust from his point of view, even bragging." And the thought that this is on tape and this thing exists, from the Nazi perpetrator himself admitting what he did, this was unreal for me. I mean, I was obsessed with looking and trying to find every piece of detail about those tapes and how did it happen and where they are. And when I'm obsessed with something and I'm going to this mission, or going to the unknown, with a lot of devotion and with the belief that I can do it. So it did happen, and of course with the help of so many people like MGM Studios and Cannes Television and Sipur, an Israeli studio. They all made it happen.
And so I know, I've watched it, and you walk us through sort of the story of Sasson and Gideon Hausner, but how do those tapes end up in your hands? They exist. Just give us the sort of a brief history of the tape. So Sasson is recording Eichmann in 1952, I believe, or 57,
1957, and basically after 1 year, they forget about this thing that they went through. They are planning to publish one day a book when Eichmann will die, so Sasson will have rights to publish a book, like some sort of a pension fund for the family of Eichmann, so they could use it for some money. But then something changes, and Eichmann is being kidnapped by the Mossad and being tried in Jerusalem. And Zassin understands that he has something in his hands, so he sells a story based on those tapes to Life magazine in the States. And after the trial, when Eichmann is being hanged by Israel, Zassin, we don't know exactly when, but he feels that he wants to give back something to the family, some sort of a regret to what he did, to his betrayal towards Eichmann, and he probably gives it to them, to the Eichmann family.
Let me just pause for a second so I get things right. He gives the tapes to Life magazine. Is he giving the tapes to Life magazine or the manuscripts?
So he gives the manuscripts based on the tapes. By the way, we know that he reused the tapes. He didn't have money to keep all the tapes. So he had something like between 15 to 20 something hours in which he re-recorded. So we don't have more than 15 genuine hours of recordings, but checking those recordings to the manuscripts, we know that the manuscripts, which present something like 100 hours, are pretty accurate. So you could really understand what happened there from the manuscripts, from the transcripts. And what we know is Life magazine signed with Zassin according to the transcripts, but we did have access for the first time to the Life magazine archive, Time Life. They opened it for the first time after 60 years, and we discovered, what do you think? Do they hold a copy of the tapes, or let's say one copy of the tapes?
They probably needed to. I would go with yes.
Yes, you were right.
Wow.
So they had, during all those years, a copy of the tape, which could have served...
Of one tape or all the tapes?
Of one tape. Just to make sure that what exists in the manuscripts is accurate, at least legally. So they do have one copy, and they could have helped the Israeli prosecutor, but they didn't. Well, maybe you can justify them because, keeping journalistic sources confidential and everything. But we know that they did have a tape. And Zassin eventually gives the tapes to the Eichmann family. And we know that they had the need for money financially, so they a big publishing house from Switzerland bought it from them.
What year are we talking about?
We don't know exactly, but it
probably... Do we know what decade?
Yeah, it probably happened between 80s and 90s, but we assume that. And then late 90s, this anonymous publishing house discovered this in their basement.
But they bought it. So
they bought it, but they went into bankruptcy, and this publishing house just changed from one company to another, and then a company discovers this in their basement, and they just deliver it to the German State Archive for preservation. So they still, the tapes belong to this anonymous owner, but he doesn't agree that anyone will know that this belongs to him. Okay? What are the reasons? You can think for yourself. So I don't know who is the real owner. I was negotiating with him through the German State Archive.
Just 1 second. So you knew what you hear that these tapes exist, and where do you go first?
So after a long research of trying to understand where the tapes are, I did address the one and only big expert, I would say, in the world, Dr. Bettina Stangnet, a German expert who did a big research and published a book 10 years ago on the tapes. She is, you could say, one of the leading researchers who listened to the tapes from beginning to the end and did a whole research about it. And she told me you will join a long list of filmmakers who tried to put their hands on these tapes and didn't succeed. So I think she gave me more motivation to try and get them. And I started negotiating with the help of associate producer Lucas Weinbier in Germany, and a researcher of this project who helped me addressing them and doing the negotiation, and took some time, but we did eventually convince them to give us the access to all the tapes. During all these years, I should be very sincere here, that some of these tapes, the same 5 to 10 minutes, they were given back in the late 90s for one TV station in Germany to prove that this is the authentic tapes. And since then, no one used them. And of course, no one got access to the full tapes.
So again, so she tells you you can't find it, and then you contact multiple publishers, and
I contacted the German State Archive directly. I discovered that it's there and started negotiating with them.
Got it. And just listening to it, what was the thing that stood out most? What surprised you? There's a lot of shocking information there. What stood out most?
I think that, I don't know German. I had to use translators, and it took me some time to really understand the content. But it's not only the content that I wanted to understand. I think the main thing that was for me shocking was to hear those sounds that present the daily life and routine of where this all happened. It happened at the living room of the Zassin family, and you hear the daughter singing from the other room, and you hear the mother coming and saying, "Oh, Eichmann, I forgot, I couldn't find cigarettes at the store. I hope you will manage." And Eichmann is telling her, "Yeah, my dear, it's fine." And then returning to describe the horrific scenes of the final solution. This is the proximity between the banal life and the stories of the crime, the magnitude of this crime that you cannot really understand. And or the fly, the fly that runs by when they are talking about the Holocaust, and then they kill the fly and they say, "Oh, it's just like a Jewish fly. He's like nagging us." These were the moments that you understand that these tapes are for real, and you get to hear Nazi people talking about the Holocaust in a very ordinary way. And I think this is the most shocking thing.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way when you hear him speaking about the Auschwitz commander, Rudolph Hess. And he says, "Oh, he was a family man and he was a gentle person, etc." So they have this need to show themselves as gentle, and yet at the same time, they commit the worst crimes in history. I think another thing that stood out to me was the idea that he's making fun of the Nuremberg Nazis, saying, "Oh, they should not have denied." And yet when you see him there in Jerusalem on trial, he's a schlepper with the big suit, obviously on purpose, and he's denied, and every word is a lie from him. So I guess my next question is harder to play, because hindsight is always harder to know what would have happened. But what would have happened had Eichmann not existed? Had Hitler not seen what he did in Vienna, in terms of getting the Jews to immigrate and taking all their possessions? How would have the Holocaust played out differently had Eichmann never existed?
Look, we need to understand that Eichmann is not unique in his work. He did have a lot of contribution to the final solution, to implementing the final solution plan. And in a way, he was in charge of all these countries that were occupied by Germany, tracing the Jews, organizing them, placing them on trains and bringing them to death camps. This was his role. So there is a debate if it's between 1 million to 2.5 million Jews were died because of Eichmann's deeds. But you had many more that died in several other places because of other people and because the cruelty of other people. So it's not only Eichmann, but of course Eichmann had a significant role, I think mainly because he wanted to do his job in a very sufficient way. He wanted to prove himself to be the best. So in a way, he did more than what he was ordered to do. He wanted always to present himself as the best. And by the way, his rank wasn't high as you would think. He's, I know the rank in Hebrew. I don't know the rank in, I'll tell you the rank.
It's in Hebrew.
It's Gan Aluf, you know, what's
I think
the rank?
maybe Lieutenant Colonel. Is that...
Yeah, exactly. Something like this. So it's not a high rank. It's not a big general, but he's in charge of this minor department dealing with this Jewish matter that no one wants to deal with. So they gave it to this low-rank officer who proved himself to be very good in his work, and he was always, you know, frustrated that he was not promoted, that he didn't get the attention that he deserves. Hitler didn't meet Eichmann. Eichmann wasn't in, of course. Hitler would never meet someone like Eichmann. Eichmann is not
shocking. So let me ask you,
not in a position to meet Hitler.
Wow, that is shocking. I guess I'm wondering in those cases where it's known that he gave no exceptions, he never, you know, even if there was pressure, that was just pure hate?
Pure hate, I would say, pure devotion to the Nazi ideology, his need to prove himself to be the best in so many ways. Yes, that's part of it.
I guess, look, I come from a Lithuanian Jewish family, and in the first 11 days of the Nazis in Lithuania, more than 40,000 Lithuanian Jews are killed. Lithuania, I believe, is the only country where the Nazis had to complain or defend the Jews because they saw that the treatment was so barbaric and that they were burying children alive that they said, you know, we can't let this happen. So it does make me wonder, you know, when we ask about what would have happened without Eichmann, for example, in the case of Hungary, do you think that it would just be something like Lithuania, where locals would just butcher everyone at even a higher rate?
You know, there's a story that people say about Eichmann, and of course, as part of the what he tells Zassen and also part of the trial, there is no one knows if it's exactly because Himmler sent Eichmann or Müller, one of his commanders, to see exactly what's happening in the beginning of the works of the Einsatzgruppen, when they just invaded the East territories and just shot people on big graves and everything. And Eichmann was there, and he went back home and said, "This is not the way to deal with it. We should find a more suitable, what's the word, musari, which is
moral,
terrible,
which is crazy.
Moral, you know, it's insane that this is the way they saw it. But from their point of view, placing people in gas chambers is a better way to deal with killing them. So, and there is this thought that this is Eichmann's contribution to the mass killing, the fact that they were killed in gas chambers and in a more, you know, in a
more of a like almost like it was a factory.
Exactly.
But I guess the question is, which is hard to really discuss, is what would happen without that, without his German efficiency. of mass murder on a industrial scale, would have all of Europe looked like Lithuania? Would Hungary look like Lithuania? We can't know.
We don't know. I don't know, and I'm not. I dealt a lot with the history of the Holocaust. I really dived in, talked with a lot of experts, but still, I'm not an historian. You should talk with one of them to get an answer for this.
All right, and I think to me, one of the most enraging parts about the recording was actually a semi-minor detail where he calls the people who walked into the gas chambers idiots. And he says, they thought that the shower heads were showers. The idea that someone calls 3-year-olds that he tricked into being murdered idiots and sees himself as the smart man is the most enraging. Are there other cases where he sort of thinks himself to be the smartest while doing this?
It's all a matter of making people, and one of the experts in the show, again, Bettina Stangnitz, says that Eichmann is a master of he's the best liar or master of
deception.
Deception. Thank you for the word. So it's all based, the whole Holocaust is based on how are we going to make them believe in something else. So forcing people in Auschwitz a moment before they enter the gas chambers to fill in those letters that they sent back home saying we're okay, everything is okay, come to meet us. And they give those letters to people that are about to go onto the trains. This is the whole deceptive technique that Eichmann is in charge of. I mean, that's part of the way they convince so many people to go, to believe in other things. That's part of it.
Wow. I think it's you see a lot of bad and evil when you watch these films, and to me, I think one of the great heroes and really admirable people that you see here is Gideon Hausner. The image of Gideon Hausner, which I would say is, besides for his ability to balance, the suspense, and you do an amazing job showing that, the suspense of maybe the tapes are going to come, and how do you get the tapes, and how do you get them legally? His ability to give people the opportunity to testify, the psychology, the catharsis, what else did you learn about Gideon Hausner? You have his family members there.
I think his biggest contribution to the study of Holocaust, to the way, moreover, to the way Israelis mainly deal with the story of the Holocaust, deal with Holocaust survivors. I think Gideon Hausner's contribution is to give a stage to those Holocaust survivors, giving them the stage to tell their story in front of people so people could understand in an eye level what happened to them without criticizing them and giving them, most of those testimonies, witnesses in the trial didn't really know Eichmann. You could count maybe 10 out of the 100 knew Eichmann face to face, could recognize him, had a sense of who he was, knew his responsibility. So in a way, Gideon Hausner used the Eichmann trial to tell the big story of the Holocaust, to give those people a chance to talk and to change their image. And this is really a turning point in the history of Holocaust, in a way that from then to where we are now, we respect those people. We don't criticize them for what they have, went through during this time. And for my generation, it's even hard to understand that during those years, those Holocaust survivors were perceived as people that were, that shouldn't talk or should feel guilty for what they have gone through. unthinkable, but
Yeah.
that's the way.
I mean, in Israel, yeah, you had the idea that they should have fought more. And I got to tell you, it hurts me to this day. I see people posting on social media all these images of people in the camps, and then on the other side, and it's done with good intention. And on the other side, Israeli soldiers and never again. And to me, that's all part of that ethos of like, okay, here we were helpless, and it comes from a good place, but the idea of like, oh, here are the soldiers and here are the people who can defend themselves is part of that. Gideon Hausner, I don't know if, first of all, one image there, you'll be surprised, that brought me to tears was not from inside of the courtroom. And if you have this image and I could share it, I would be very happy. It's the people standing outside of the court with a radio. And some of them are Haredi, Hasidish, secular, and everyone's glued to the same radio, listening to what's happening inside of the courtroom. Do you know what image I'm talking about?
Of course, just a sec.
That's
I'll try to
bring it up.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's
just to see this moment, which is
it's
yeah, one of the most powerful moments in the trial, is Gideon Hausner's opening speech.
Yes. But we see a lot of what goes on inside of the court. You know, the famous image of Katsetnik fainting while he's testifying. And by the way, something I didn't know myself, I gave a talk about Elie Wiesel, and I learned this, is that Katsetnik he wrote a lot about the Holocaust, and he was doing a lot until then. But after he gave that testimony, he was in the hospital, almost paralyzed for more than a half a year. And so the testimony, you know, it brought an eruption of many feelings. But I think that picture of people standing outside, we see today with everything going on in Israel, there's a lot of division, right, left, secular, and religious. And sort of that image of everyone crowded around the same radio and just glued together, albeit under tragic circumstances, I think is just a powerful moment, because it's we forget sometimes how intertwined we are, and we forget the history that we share, and we forget the destiny and the future that we have. And I thought that was a very, very powerful image.
Let's watch it. You should give me the
so yeah, I think it does say you have ability to share, but give me a half a second. Give me a half a second.
I will
here. Yes, you're good. All right.
Israel was a country without television, and the Eichmann trial is the first televised trial in the history of television in a country with no television. So people could only listen to it in the radio, and we will see just less than a minute. I'm not allowed to show more.
Okay.
Before the trial, Hausner gives Ben-Gurion the text of his opening speech.
במקום זה, בו אני עומד לפניכם, שופטי ישראל, ללמד קטגוריה על אדולף אייכמן. אין אני עומד יחידי. עמדי ניצבים כאן, בשעה זו, 6 מיליון קטגורים. אכן לא יוכלו לשלוח אצבע מרשיעה כלפי תא הזכוכית, מפני שאחריו העמיתם לראות אושוויץ בסוף טרבלינקה.
And Ben-Gurion makes very few comments about it.
So it's that image, where they're standing outside and it really, wow, very, very, very powerful. And yeah, I think from your, I don't know if his family sent you a thank you. Obviously he earned it, but I don't know that the world has recognized to this day how much he was balancing, what a tightrope he was walking in terms of Israel, Germany, the West relationships, and his ability to give voice to people who never had it before.
Yeah, and I think, we have the tendency in history, when time passes, we just forget those heroes. I think Gideon Hausner had a lot of recognition during his time, and he published a book, Justice in Jerusalem, which gained a lot of international attention. But young generations, we just don't know much. We don't know about the Eichmann trial. And even though the Eichmann trial is on YouTube and you can watch all of it, but it's in black and white, and who has the power to watch hundreds of hours? And I think that was part of my purpose by the way, in colorizing the trial. I wanted it to appeal young audiences, so they will be able to watch it and feel that's reality. That's the same as we can see today on television. And I'll use this opportunity just because we saw a moment from it, that you can see it on Amazon Prime in the States. And thanks to them, it is available to so many people.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, but it definitely got a good and strong response here. I know I spoke about it already in synagogue. I actually was on another podcast last night. I'll send it to you, speaking about it. But it definitely is something that is a founding brick in Jewish history in terms of what we've been through and what affects so many of us to this day. I guess my question to you is, personally, how do you feel like this transformed you? Did it, in terms of whether it's your grandparents' family history, the way you relate to the Holocaust, to Israel, to anything in between, do you feel like this changed you?
First of all, I learned much more than what I knew before I did this show, and of course, I dived into the story of the Holocaust in all its complexities, and understanding much more of what happened there. And also, I must say that I have the passion to go even deeper and get to know more stories, and I have the passion to continue and deal with the story of the Holocaust. I think there are still stories that we must tell, and stories that maybe were controversial. I'm giving you a hint to what I am going to deal in the preview. So I'm very curious about the Kastner story, which is
same here.
It's a very short sequence in the Devil's Confession, but I think it deserves bigger attention of what happened really to Kastner, what Kastner did, how he was murdered in Israel. It's the first assassination, political assassination in the history of Israel. So this is something that I will deal with in the near future, hopefully soon. And yes, it's you get to see it. It's a big responsibility, but I'm very fortunate to be able to do so. So yeah.
Wow. All right. Just a question in terms of how Eichmann related to the Jews. This is a disorder that many anti-Semites have, from Kanye West to any number of people. The idea that somehow they feel chummy, and that they almost sometimes you feel like they want to be Jewish, or that they feel like they're one of us. The way Eichmann calls everyone and he says, "I'm the Tsar of the Jews." He travels to Israel, to the British Mandate, and the trust that he's able to gain from Jews. How did that play out in terms of his identity? Did he, what were his feelings to Jews? Why did he feel like why was he able to manipulate Jews so well? Did he know Judaism better than others? What was the story in terms of how he saw himself in relation to Jews?
I think a lot of anti-Semites have this feeling of רגשי נחיתות. Help me with this
inferiority word. Complex. They feel
inferiority complex. And I think Eichmann was the same when he was in contact with Jews. It was the hatred and at the same time admiration to something that he couldn't achieve in his own life, and how successful Jews were, and smart. And this is the even says in this final speech that he gives to Zassen, he says that we didn't succeed in killing all these Jews, and one day they will come against us because they're smarter than we are. So our future generations will be very upset that we didn't conclude our job. We didn't conclude our work. So, and the thing is that Eichmann understood from the very beginning that he should attract those Jewish leaders and try to manipulate them, talk with them as if he knows a bit of Yiddish, as if he knows a bit of Hebrew, he knows the tradition, he knows the religion. So yes, I'm one of you. You can talk with me freely, but at the same time, I'm also threatening your life and threatening your people. So you better be with me and collaborate with me. So that's the way he's doing it. It's bringing the leaders close to him, threatening them, and gaining their trust and collaboration at the same time.
It's interesting. I was reading about the Jews of Greece, the Holocaust in Greece. And when the Nazis tried to get the names of the Jews in Greece from the rabbis, to me it's fascinating. There was one Ashkenazi rabbi who was in the Judenrat and collaborated with them. And then there are at least two Sephardic rabbis who, the second they get called in by the Gestapo to give in the lists of all the Jews, they say, of course, they go to the offices and they burn all the lists and they send out warnings to everyone. And I sometimes wonder if it's not the shared culture, whether it's Yiddish or sort of a Western tendency that allowed the Nazis to manipulate Jews so well. And when it came to Sephardic rabbis, they saw right what it is, and they sensed the danger. So sometimes the similarity enabled him.
Yeah, I think you are right. I think the fact that that he knew that they wanted to be good citizens in their own country. They want to obey the law. They don't want to make trouble. Let's collaborate. Let us not become troublemakers. And of course, he threatens us. He knows who are our families and everything. Yeah, it's part of the whole thing. This is why we cannot really judge or criticize anyone who was there. I mean, not even the leaders and the Judenrats, and we just don't know how we would have acted if we were in the same situation.
Question in terms of all this production, the family of Eichmann today, I'm assuming some of them carry his name. Did any of them ever contact you? How do you see the fact that they never changed their name, or the fact that they held onto the tapes? Did you have any interactions, or just any thoughts in terms of the families of Eichmann or Zassen when you produced this?
So the four sons of Eichmann, three of them remained in Argentina and remained neo-Nazis and very extreme right-wing devoters and antisemites. I don't know. I think only one of the three is still alive. But then you have the fourth child who was really young during the trial when his father was kidnapped and everything. He was 5 years old. His name is Ricardo Eichmann. He's a professor of archaeology in Germany. He really stepped away from the legacy of his father and, drove himself in a different direction. But we were in touch with him, and he said, and I really appreciate him for saying it. He said, I've built a whole different life. I have been recognized as a professor of archaeology with huge success, and still every time people are interviewing me or coming to me, it's for one subject matter. And I have nothing to do what my father did. I don't even remember him. I don't know what he did. I'm not a big expert as you are. And this is why I don't want to give an interview again. He gave one interview very big during the 90s, I think. and he met one of the kidnappers of Eichmann from the Mossad. But that's it, and I truly understand him.
Has he considered a name change? You know, there's a city near Toronto called Kitchener, Ontario. Used to be called Berlin, Ontario, and after World War I, they were so embarrassed they changed it. So
look, I can't. I don't know. I can't judge him. I don't want to place myself in his shoes. I can only say, you know, we have a moral guide in our Torah that says that avot achlu boser v'shinei banim tikena. Okay, we shouldn't judge sons for what their fathers did, and vice versa.
Wow. Okay, and then I guess one last question. You mentioned Kastner, and it sounds like you're, discussing something about it in the future. Look, the story of Kastner has so many levels. To me, what's fascinating, it's such a major source of theology in terms of the opposition of the Satmar community to the state of Israel. The more I learn about it, the more fascinated I am. So it almost reduces and erases all the theology. So I'll just give you the background. So Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, I'm sure you've heard of, the Satmar Rebbe, he was a fierce opposer of Zionism before the Holocaust already. And he advised people to remain in Europe. People were thinking of running away. He told them to remain. He ends up being one of the people that goes on the Kastner train. And he then moves to Israel, later to New York in, I believe, 1952. And he becomes the greatest theological opposition to the state of Israel. And there's so much historical background when you realize that he knew Kastner personally. And not only that, but Satmar make this wild claim that the state of Israel collaborated with the Nazis via Kastner. And it's this world in which you have this whole theological discussion among the religious Zionists and the Satmar, but you really got to go back to the story, which is what you do. And see, scrap away all the ideology and say, okay, who knew what, who did what, and figure it out. And so I'm just wondering if this issue with Kastner you think is gonna shed some light on some of these debates, the theology of it.
Oh, of course. I think Kastner's story has so many layers in it, so many layers, and the fact that we are still dealing with the Kastner story, even in Israel of today, go into the social networks and, on Twitter and Facebook and see how much people are still discussing the story of Kastner, and the debate still goes on. Who was Kastner? Was he a savior of Jews or was he a collaborator? And I think, and it also reflects right wing and left wing of Israel today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still very much, this is why I still want to deal with it and tell the story with as many facts that I could find, or at the same time showing the two angles if we don't have facts. So bringing the two sides of the story, because I think the story deserves, showing its complexity and not only one side of it, or that's the solution because it doesn't have a solution. We will never know exactly what happened there regarding Kastner.
All right, Yariv Mozer, thank you. The producer of the Eichmann tapes. It's really
the director. I'm not the producer.
Director, sorry.
Director.
This is how bad I am at film. I don't know.
I'm writer, director of The Devil's Confession, and there's a long list of producers who did it. And again, MGM Studios, Amazon Prime for showing it, Kan Television in Israel, Sipur, Alice Communications, and so many others.
All right. Thank you so much.